A few days after Charles II of Spain died, his physicians cut open his body to find out what had gone wrong. What they wrote down doesn't read like a medical report. It reads like a horror story. But the most chilling part isn't what was found inside him. It's that his own family had spent 200 years building him that way. On purpose. There's a reason his subjects called him El Hechizado, the Bewitched. The Habsburgs did not conquer their empire. They married it. Other dynasties bled for territory. The Habsburgs signed contracts. They had a boast of their own for it, repeated across Europe for centuries. Let others wage war. You, fortunate Austria, marry. And it worked spectacularly. Through weddings alone, one family accumulated Spain, the Netherlands, chunks of Italy, the Americas, the Philippines, an empire where the sun genuinely never set. But an empire assembled by marriage has one terrifying weakness. Marry outside the family, and one day a stranger inherits everything. So they stopped marrying outside the family. Between 1516 and 661, the kings of Habsburg Spain contracted 11 marriages. 9 of them were between blood relatives. Uncles married nieces. First cousins married first cousins. Double first cousins married each other. Each generation, the family trees stopped branching outward and started folding back in on itself. Over and over, tighter and tighter, until it wasn't a tree at all. It was a knot, and the knot had a face. Look at the Habsburg portraits, Titian's, Velázquez's, and you'll see it in every generation. The heavy protruding lower jaw, the lip that juts and hangs. Court painters didn't hide it. They emphasized it. That jaw was the family signature, the visible stamp of legitimacy, proof that the blood in this man was the same blood that had ruled half the world since Charles V. The deformity wasn't an embarrassment. It was a brand. Nobody in Madrid seems to have connected the brand to the coffins. And there were a lot of coffins. Habsburg babies died at a rate that should have terrified somebody. Infant after infant, heir after heir, buried before their first birthdays in a royal crypt that was filling up faster than the nursery. Then, on the 6th of November 1661, in the Royal Alcazar in Madrid, the knot produced one final child. His father was King Philip IV, aged 56. A man so committed to the performance of Spanish majesty that contemporary chronicles report he was almost never seen to laugh or smile in public. A living statue presiding over a kingdom quietly going bankrupt underneath him. Call him the melancholy architect because he built this. His mother was Mariana of Austria, aged 27. She was also Philip's niece, the daughter of his own sister. She'd originally been engaged to Philip's son. When the son died, Philip married the 14-year-old girl himself rather than let the match and the alliance escape the family. Their child was named Charles. He was the only legitimate son to survive, and Spain celebrated in the streets. The celebrations were premature. Charles could not speak until he was around 4 years old, He could not walk unaided until at least 6. Some accounts say 8, and the sources genuinely disagree. He suffered rickets severe enough that his legs were braced. He caught measles, chickenpox, rubella, and smallpox, and somehow survived all of them, which in that crypt-filling family was arguably the most remarkable achievement of his life. His head was reportedly too large for his body. His jaw, that beautiful, legitimate, divinely appointed Habsburg jaw, had arrived in its most extreme form yet. He was, physically, the weakest heir the dynasty had ever produced. He was also, at the age of 3 years and 10 months, the King of Spain. Philip IV died on the 17th of September, 1665, and the empire on which the sun never set passed to a toddler who couldn't yet stand up on his own. His mother took the regency. Mariana had just become the most powerful woman in Europe, and she responded by dressing for the rest of her life in the dark, heavy habit of a nun. Court portraits show her in it. She turned the Spanish court into something between a monastery and a mausoleum, gloomy, rigid, suffocating. Call her the suffocating guardian, because that's the kindest reading available. She wrapped Charles in cotton wool. He was reportedly carried everywhere, coddled, isolated, protected from every draft and every demand. And here, the schoolbook version gets it wrong in an interesting way. The story says Charles was left completely uneducated, a feral idiot in a crib. That's an exaggeration. He was given a tutor, Ramos del Manzano, from the age of 6. He had lessons in music and mathematics from 12. Contemporary diplomats noted stretches of real lucidity in him, which somehow makes it worse, because it means Charles was aware enough to understand exactly what was happening to him. And what was happening to him was this. The most celebrated feature in the most powerful family in the world had turned into a disability. According to the dispatches of the British envoy Alexander Stanhope, in the 1690s, Charles's jaw was so severely misaligned that he could not chew his food. He swallowed it whole. The result was a lifetime of violent stomach cramps, vomiting, and diarrhea. His mouth would not close properly, so he drooled. The mark of divine right had become a mechanism for daily humiliation. The Habsburgs had bred their crown into a man's face until his face stopped working, and then they decided he needed a wife. By 1675, Charles was 14 and legally of age. Court factions kept the real power away from him anyway, which, given the alternative, was probably one of the few sensible decisions anyone made in that palace. But the succession could not wait. Spain needed an heir, and Spain needed one immediately. The bride selected was Marie-Louise d'Orléans, niece of Louis XIV of France. She was 17, healthy, vivacious, and French. According to the memoirs of the Duc de Saint-Simon, when she learned she was being shipped to Madrid to marry the King of Spain, she fell to her knees in front of her uncle, weeping, begging him not to send her. Louis sent her. Call her the sacrificial pawn, because everyone at that wedding knew what she was. They married in November 1679. Charles was 18, and here the story does something nobody expects. Charles adored her. By every account, this fragile, drooling, half-crippled king fell completely and sincerely in love with his French bride, and reportedly kept loving her for the 10 years she was trapped in Madrid. It changed nothing, because the marriage produced no children, and the reports coming out of the Spanish court, from French diplomats, from the Queen's own circle, were unambiguous and humiliating. There was sexual dysfunction. There was, in clinical terms, no realistic prospect of an heir. In 1689, Marie-Louise died suddenly, aged 26. The likely cause was appendicitis, though rumors of poison swirled through every embassy in Europe, as rumors of poison always did. Charles was destroyed. French ambassadorial dispatches report that he said, simply, "The Queen is dead, so I shall soon die." He was wrong by 11 years, and those 11 years would be the worst of his life. A second wife arrived almost immediately. Maria Anna of Neuburg, married by proxy in August 1689, in person by May 1690. She was 22. Charles was 28. She was chosen largely because her family was famous, aggressively fertile. It made no difference. She too reported impotence. There would be no child. There would never be a child. And that is when the Spanish court arrived at its explanation. Not biology, not the marriage contracts stacked in their own archives, not the 9 consanguineous unions in 11. The court of Spain looked at a king who couldn't chew, couldn't walk properly, couldn't father a child, and suffered seizures, and concluded that he had been bewitched. This part is documented, and it is genuinely astonishing. The belief was real. Whether anyone at court privately doubted it, we'll likely never know. Charles became El Hechizado, the Bewitched, and the palace went hunting for the sorcerer. Leading the hunt was the royal confessor, Father Froilan Diaz. Inquisition records from his own later trial between 1698 and 1700 describe what he arranged. Exorcisms were performed over the King of Spain. Demons were formally interrogated and commanded to name who had fed the king a cursed potion, called Diaz the deluded exorcist, though deluded may be generous. The accusations conveniently targeted the king's political enemies, and Diaz himself ended up on trial for it. Meanwhile, the actual medical treatment was arguably worse. Court physicians subjected a man with lifelong gastrointestinal agony to brutal purges, the standard 17th century response to a body that wouldn't cooperate. There is also a claim, repeated in later accounts, that Charles had the coffins of his ancestors opened so he could look at the bodies of his family. It's a story that appears in secondary narratives without solid contemporary confirmation, and it may well be a later embellishment, but it's easy to understand why it stuck to him. It's exactly what this story feels like, because Charles knew. That's the part the punchline version leaves out. In 1690, when he was around 25, the secretary to the papal nuncio wrote a dispatch describing the king. He could not straighten his body without support. His face was long and curved upward. The Habsburg lip was pronounced. He seemed stupefied, without will of his own, and his body, the secretary wrote, was as weak as his mind. That man ruled the Americas. He ruled the Philippines. He ruled an empire that circled the globe, and he couldn't stand up in it without a serpent holding him. He owned half the earth and was a prisoner inside his own bones. And every court in Europe was watching his body like brokers watching a stock. Because the moment it failed, the largest empire on the planet went up for grabs. The vultures didn't wait for him to die. They negotiated over him while he was still breathing. The Treaty of The Hague in 1698 carved up his inheritance and handed the crown to Joseph Ferdinand of Bavaria, a compromise candidate everyone could tolerate. Then Joseph Ferdinand died in 1699, aged 6, so Europe simply drew up a new one. The Treaty of London in 1700 reassigned Spain to the Austrian Archduke Charles. Nobody consulted the actual King of Spain about the disposal of Spain. By September 1700, Charles was dying. His body swelled. He couldn't stand. By the 28th of September, he couldn't eat at all. And in that state, on the 2nd and 3rd of October, he signed his final will. He gave everything: Spain, the Netherlands, Italy, the Americas, the Philippines, the whole 200-year Habsburg accumulation, to Philip of Anjou, the grandson of Louis XIV, a Bourbon, a Frenchman, according to the dispatches of the Marquis de Harcourt. He wept when he signed it. 200 years of incest. 9 consanguineous marriages out of 11. Every deformed jaw, every dead infant, every niece married to an uncle, all of it done for one reason: so that no rival family could ever inherit. And the last Habsburg of Spain, sobbing over a document he could barely hold, handed the entire thing to France. The strategy didn't just fail. It delivered the empire directly to the people it was designed to keep out. Charles II died in Madrid on the 1st of November, 1700. He was 38 years and 360 days old, 5 days short of his 39th birthday. He had been king for 35 years, which is to say, for essentially his entire conscious life. He left no children. He was the last of his line. The will held. Philip of Anjou was proclaimed King of Spain, and then Europe, having spent years politely negotiating the corpse's estate, decided it didn't like the outcome after all, and went to war over it anyway. The War of the Spanish Succession ran from 1701 to 1714 and killed hundreds of thousands of people across 2 continents. That was the funeral. Now the autopsy. His physicians opened him a few days after his death. And the description that came down through history is one of the most quoted passages in the history of European monarchy. The account says his body did not contain a single drop of blood. that his heart was the size of a peppercorn, his lungs corroded, his intestines rotten and gangrenous. He had one testicle, black as coal, and his head was full of water. It's grotesque. It's perfect. It's the exact ending this story deserves. The incest king opened up, revealed as hollow. And it is almost certainly not what a doctor wrote in 1700. Because here is the thing nobody says out loud. That famous wording, the peppercorn, the coal, the head full of water, does not come with an archival reference to any surviving contemporary autopsy protocol. It traces most directly to a modern secondary compilation, a 2005 Spanish book on the diseases of the kings of Spain, and from there it went everywhere. An autopsy was genuinely performed. But the phrasing everybody quotes is a summary of a summary, dressed as a document. The "not a single drop of blood" line in particular isn't medicine. It's metaphor. It's what the 17th century thought a cursed king ought to look like inside. Nobody has ever taken DNA from Charles II. Not once. No sequencing, no genome, no lab confirmation of anything. So the curse went unproven for 300 years, until 2009, when it was finally established. Not by a scalpel, by arithmetic. A team led by Gonzalo Alvarez, publishing in Palos 1, reconstructed the Habsburg family tree across 16 generations, over 3,000 individuals, and calculated the inbreeding coefficient of every Spanish Habsburg king. Charles II came out at 0.254 for scale. The theoretical coefficient for the child of a full brother and sister is 0.25. Charles's parents were an uncle and a niece. On paper, that alone should not have produced that number. But 2 centuries of folding the family tree back into itself had loaded so much repeated ancestry into his blood that his uncle-niece parentage arrived at the mathematical equivalent of a sibling union. The Habsburgs didn't need one act of incest to destroy him. They had committed it in installments across 200 years in front of the whole of Europe, with the Pope's blessing and a signed contract every time. The same team proposed that 2 rare recessive disorders might together explain his symptoms, though they explicitly labeled that speculation. And it has never been confirmed. Every confident modern diagnosis of Charles II is a guess. Then, in 2019, a study in the Annals of Human Biology had maxillofacial surgeons analyze 66 Habsburg portraits and found the severity of that famous jaw tracked directly with the inbreeding in the pedigree. The family signature was measurable. It always had been. It was hanging on their walls. They spent 2 centuries painting the evidence and calling it divine right. The court of Spain hunted demons through their own palace, interrogating the heir, looking for the witch who had cursed their king. They never found one. They never could. The curse wasn't cast. It was drafted, notarized, and filed in their own marriage contracts. Thanks for watching History's Hidden Lives. If you love uncovering the best stories in history, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring with us.